This is the moment we've all been waiting for. We've been waiting. We've been sitting with the edge of our seats since Friday, hoping that Friday would have arrived, but it didn't, but it arrived on Sunday, which is even better. And here we have Dr. Jameth Sheridan, doctor of holistic medicine, naturopath, and hardcore natural medicine researcher. Is one of the early pioneers of the vegan, organic, holistic, and raw food movements. Jameth has been immersed in holistic health for 27 years, veganism for 25 years, and raw foods for 24 years. He's a ceaseless researcher, experimenter, and inventor. Let's just stand up for a second and get some kind of, I want to hear some beat music, some good beat music. Dr. Sheridan is the co-founder of Health Force Nutritionals, which has become one of the premier superfood and alternative medicine companies in the world over the past 20 years, providing extreme quality, value, biocompatible nutritional superfoods internationally, including to people with life-threatening conditions. Let's get some beat music. Jay, come on, you guys. Dr. Jameth Sheridan. I see you guys in the back. Dr. Jameth Sheridan. Let's get the energy going. I see you guys. Come on. I see you back there. All right. You guys ready? Are you guys ready? Dr. Jameth Sheridan. One more time, guys. It wasn't loud enough. He's not ready. We gotta get him ready. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Jameth Sheridan! Woo!
No, it's fine. Thank you very much for the warm reception. I want to thank the event for being thoughtful enough and flexible enough to reschedule this. My talk, thank you very much. Sorry I missed the original lecture. I also want to thank Truth Calkins for speaking in my spot and being flexible and generous enough to allow me to speak in this spot. Thank you, Truth. I don't think I've ever spoken to as fired up and fun of a crowd. The Longevity Expo really engenders that. I also, some of you know me, I kind of bandy about the words hardcore a lot. And the reason I do that is that's kind of how I'm made, that's kind of who I am, and that's kind of one of the things I bring to the world. Hardcore can be good or it can be bad. You can have great leaders that do great things or great dictators that do horrible things. And sometimes people that are hardcore or fired up or passionate, they have conflicts with other people. Actually, many years ago at a Hippocrates Health Institute in West Palm Beach, Florida, there was a group of raw food, vegan-oriented people. We all got together. We all thought we believed the same things, and we tried to come up with a document to unify us. And it was a couple days, and it was a fearsome battle over concepts, over how much raw, how much cook, if it at all, herbs, no herbs, how much water, what type of water. We were all extremely passionate about our views because we were so dedicated to helping people heal. Even people that agreed at each other were at each other's throats, sometimes in a healthy way, other times in a not, depending on who they were. But most of the people in that group, and I had the either pleasure or displeasure of being the moderator of that group, so everyone was coming at me. And some of the people in that group, we were able to hash it out, come out with a document, and then be friends afterwards. Others decided to hate each other. Now, as a culture, when you're young and two kids fight on the playground, you tend to see everyone goes in crowds around because there's going to be controversy, there's going to be a fight. And sometimes people engender that, hey, this kid said that about you, this kid said that, and sometimes fights can happen. And before I talk about my lecture, which I will not hold back on my lecture, I want to say that I very much value and respect the opinions of other speakers, even if they're in conflict with me. Because anyone at the Longevity Expo, we are 95% in alignment. It's these finer points that we all may be passionate about. Lately, Daniel Vitalis and I have been at odds on a couple different things, but we had a meeting the other day, and we decided to have a warrior alliance. And that we were both fighting for the same things in general, and we had the same goals in mind, and we were so aligned in so many ways. There was a few areas that we had a different view and a different interpretation of the facts on. But we also decided that when we were having a different interpretation of the facts, when we were going to battle that it was on. When it was done, hopefully we could drink elixirs and wheatgrass juice heartily afterwards, and that the Spirit will maintain both those, both the energy and also in this talk, as I get about to start, it is definitely on. I only have about 60 minutes, so I'm going to talk fast and furious. You can always get the DVD. It's going to be talking about veganism, yes or no. Why should you or why should you not? Raw, should you be all raw or not? And also, you'll see I'm not using a wireless mic. We're going to talk about EMS and cancer and cell phones. I have some demonstrations that all of you are subject to some things that you need to know about cancer, which I've done a lot of research with. I've seen who's lived and I've seen who has died. And if you see me starting to yell and scream and get pretty passionate about cancer, it's because I've worked with people and I've had the pleasure to see them have success, and I've also had the displeasure to see them have failure. And failure is humbling, and we also need to learn from failure. I don't want anyone here to fail in their life. I want to say that nature is my guiding force, always my guiding force, but it's not my binding force. What I mean by that is just because an ancient culture did something, or just because Mother Nature delivers up something in a certain way, it means I will respect and honor that, and that will guide me, but I'm not going to be bound to it. For an example, if an ancient culture was patriarchal and abused their women, I'm not going to do that now because that ancient culture did. If an ancient culture was warring, I'm not going to adopt that warring principle, even if that ancient culture ate an extremely healthy diet. I also want to bring up something that's going to be very foundational for the rest of my talk. It's on nutritional prejudice, and for that, I would like the first Caucasian person I see, this gentleman right here, to please come up on stage, and the closest African-American person, please come up on stage. There we go, right there, perfect. And then be on deck, please, someone of Arabic descent and someone of Asian descent, please. Okay, please wait over there. You will be the Asian guy with ninja-like precision. Okay, please, Asian gentlemen, please step aside. We're not ready for you yet. Okay, if I came over and this gentleman pretended to just punch me in the face, just pretend you're punching me in the face, just for no reason. And then this woman came over and gave him a dirty look, and he backed off. I would determine from that, if I just based it just on these two members of each race, that white men are bad, black women rock. Now, we know that in our past, in our country, we've had some despicable prejudice against people of color. But you can see why I'm trying to say that I cannot just take just this one member and this one member and make that decision. Thank you very much. Can I have someone, the ninja back, and someone of somewhere in the Arabic world descent? First person that has Arabic descent in their blood. Is there anyone here of that nature? Someone that can stand in for that? Anybody? John, you have some Arabic descent? Come on up, hurry up. Now, in World War II, we're at war with many countries, including Japan. And then this gentleman would have looked at, whether you're Japanese or not, you look like you're Asian, so you might as well be from Japan, so we're going to take you and put you in a concentration camp. And in fact, I don't want my kids to hang out with you. I don't want to deal with you. You're a bad guy. Is that fair to assume? Was that fair to assume then? That was actual prejudice. And if, Jehan, you have some Arabic in you, then you blew up the towers. You're a terrorist. Now, that's all doing that, but you get my point. There's been personal and bigotry prejudice in the world. Now, we're going to talk about nutritional prejudice later. Thank you very much, Jahan, and Ninja, you can ninja off. I'm going to give you some contrasting views, and then I'm going to tie them all together. First thing I want to talk about is the China study. And the China study was called the Grand Prix of Epidemiological Studies. Epidemiological meaning studying large populations. And there were 6,500 people in 65 rural counties in China. The reason this area of China was chosen is because the genetics were relatively consistent there. They were all Chinese. They had been living and working on the same farms and villages for decades because they didn't want to have genetic variability there. The study studied coronary artery disease, diabetes, leukemia, and cancers of the colon, lung, breast, brain, stomach, and liver. And it was found they had the cultures that were eating significant amount of animal protein and products down to a very low amount of animal products. And in every single case, including all blood markers, animal protein intake was directly correlated with more cancer, more leukemia, more diabetes, and more heart disease. And for each tier they studied, the less animal products they ate, the closer to vegan they became, the healthier they were with all these different markers. Now, you hear some other people talking about various reasons why a vegan diet is going to cause these diseases, but when we have the largest epidemiological study in the world, it shows that that's not the case. But let's contrast that with my wife, who is a triple Vata, who was a vegan for a long time. After 5 years of being vegan and raw, she craved tuna fish. Yet the China study just indicates that the less animal products you eat, the healthier you are. That seems to be in conflict. Okay. Also want to talk about animals. We can talk about various animal studies. My wife was actually criticized. She's had rats her whole life. She's done rat rescue. She just has an affinity for them. She was criticized by one of the rat nutrition authorities in the rat world for feeding her rats a vegan diet. Said it's unethical, it's not right, they're gonna get sick and die. Whereas our rats live about 50% longer than the rats on the animal-based diet. Now, that's kind of strange. Yet, and also, the oldest living dog in the world, a canine. Now, a canine is different than a human. As human beings, we have different physiology. Our intestinal length is short. We do not have uricase enzyme that digests uric acid, which is a result of animal protein. Uric acid contributes to osteoporosis, arthritis, gout, and aging in general. We have a very different physiology than a canine. I'm going to go into that more in a minute. Yet, a canine in the Guinness Book of World Records, the longest living canine in the world, is Bramble, a border collie. Now, he's died several years ago. He lived to 29 years old. Now, this was not a raw food carnivore. This was a vegan, largely cooked food, beans and rice carnivore, living the longest lived animal in the world who is a carnivore on a vegan diet. What's up with that? Yet at the same time, 18 years of being vegan, which is in the past, I found myself viscerally craving steak juice, the blood that comes off the steak that I had when I was a kid. It was a very uncomfortable moment for me when I craved that. And I want to talk about why these things happened. I also want to talk to you about why I believe there are certain dietary principles that set up the desire for animal products and how you can easily, by not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, avoid these. Okay, let's talk about the basis. The physiological basis or the psychological basis for eating animals. Some people are claiming it's natural to eat animals, and I want to give you a perspective, and you can decide if it's natural. If you're out in the wilderness, it's just you, and I can't do the perfect example because I'm not allowed to, you are naked in the jungle somewhere. And you walk around and you eventually get hungry in this Garden of Eden paradise. So, I want to eat something, and you see fruit on a tree. And maybe you go over to it and you just meditate there or hang out there and it falls right into your hand. You pick it. It's fragrant. It tastes good. It's good for you. There's no toxins in fruits. They're magnificent. You would certainly eat fruit, it seems like, in a natural world. You probably eventually would get kind of sweeted out, would have too much sugar, and you'd go around and you'd see what animals were eating. They were eating this, they're eating that. The cow's eating that. The squirrel's eating that. They're eating these nuts. They're eating these seeds from the plants. You certainly would eat that. And you'd certainly be eating the vegetables. And as you pulled on the vegetables, you'd probably pull up the roots, and you'd say, wow, there's some root down here, and you'd probably start tasting those and seeing what you could eat. You definitely would eat these things. Now, the same squirrel that came over to try the carrot top, you don't all of a sudden salivate and look and study and stay still because you want to pounce on that squirrel. That's not a natural inclination. A cow or a buffalo, a sacred buffalo. When you see a buffalo, when I see a buffalo, I feel a reverence for Native American culture, for buffaloes, for animals. About their extinction and their plight. I don't salivate. I don't feel like I want to go over and eat that buffalo, and you go ahead and try. Just you. Now, I'm going to give an example of a chicken. Chicken is something that people eat, free-range, organic, wild, etc. Would you eat a chicken in an absolute fair state of nature? Now, chicken's not a big animal. I've got a small animal. You could probably take a chicken. But I don't know if any of you have ever tried to catch a chicken. Now, if you try to catch a chicken, you put you and a chicken out in the field, and I actually have tried to catch chickens before and goose and other birds. When you run one way, they run like they have eyes in the back of their head. For anyone who's ever done this, and even Rocky could hardly catch a chicken in the Rocky movies. So if you were going to catch a chicken, the chicken is running around, and you're trying to catch the chicken, and you are going to get tired. Really, really, really tired. But let's say this chicken we're going to handicap this chicken. This chicken is old, and it had a war with the neighboring chicken colony. It's been pecked up, and it's wounded. So after a while, you corner the chicken, and he's flapping, and you can catch the chicken. So now it's just you and the chicken. He's there, he's scratching because he thinks you're a threat, and you're gonna try to get him. So you go up to the chicken, and you grab him. You got the chicken by the throat, and while you have the chicken by the throat, this chicken is a sentient being. It was afraid of you. It can feel your energy and your adrenaline. It knows you're trying to kill it, so it's pecking you. If you've ever been scratched by a chicken, they can just rip your wrist apart, and you can die. They could kill you. They could basically make you commit suicide by slashing your wrist, slashing your throat. I mean, they're vicious animals if they need to, if they're caught in a fight. So as you're trying to catch this chicken, you've got blood dripping all over you. Assuming you had the inclination, assuming you haven't dropped the chicken yet, you better have really thick skin. I don't mean like masculine thick skin. I mean like a horse or something, like, really, really thick, because you are shredded, just you and nature. It may be scratching your genitals, it's scratching everywhere. You're in pain. Once you have the chicken and it's flopping, and you're probably stronger than the chicken if you hold two hands, what do you do next with the chicken? Do you have the inclination to just take that chicken and just crack? Or just take it and start whapping it against a rock or against something, just beating the crap out of the chicken? You probably don't. And if you do, I don't want to hang out with you because I'm worried. And if people are watching you, they're going to be like, oh my God, this person's a barbarian. They're crazy. And in fact, we do know that people that work in slaughterhouses have a vastly higher rate of violent crimes. It's not a good thing to be subjected to. I know many people who will eat animal flesh, but they don't have the honor to kill it themselves because they know it's that uncomfortable. But you've psyched yourself out. You're really hungry, whatever reason, you've killed the chicken. The chicken is dead. It's kind of moving a little bit here and there because, they say you cut the chicken's head off and it runs around what it does. So I'm even going to let you cheat now. Almost. Chicken's dead. Yeah, well, let's get a hen too, Killed his wife. Now that the chicken is on the ground, how are you going to eat this creature? Are you going to pick up to it with no hands and just go like this and use your canines? You see these? I can't cut my finger. Are you going to rip into this food with your canines, which are used as examples that we need to eat meat? You can't do it. You cannot get into these things with your canine teeth. It's not possible. These are for ripping and tearing vegetable materials. So you can't get into it with your claws. You don't have the onboard tools. Now, if I'm a wild cat or I'm a dog, I can shred this thing. I can scratch this thing. This thing is, and it's opened up. I can't do that no matter how much I work. So I'm going to let you cheat. I'm going to let you get a rock. You've got this rock, and now you're slicing into this chicken. You got to get rid of the feathers first. You got to pick them up. You are slicing into this chicken. It's going to take a while. It's going to take a lot of energy. You're going to need more calories if you do this. Once you slice into this chicken and start to rip open its skin, crack its ribs, you're going to have to break its ribs to get at the chicken. You've got this warm, moist, still moving goop and gob of organs and glands and feces and urine and detoxification organs and blood and so forth. What do you do next? Do you just rip some intestines and pancreatic juices out and just shove it in your mouth and start eating it? No, we're not physiologically or psychologically designed to. You're going to just pick it up and just stuff your face with it? Drink all the blood, which is what the carnivore does? You're not going to do that. So the reason I give this example is try this with an elephant, try it with a cow, try it with a salmon, try doing the same thing with a salmon. It's very hard to catch a fish and then knocking it up and just ripping it to shreds, eating its eyes, eating its organs, eating the feces, eating everything in there. That's what a carnivore does, and that's a whole food for a carnivore. If you're eating animal products, let's say the flesh of an animal, you're not a whole fooder. That's a fractionated, isolated food. It's not the alkaline blood. It's not all the enzymes from the pancreas. It's not everything else that make up a whole food. So just bear that in mind. But yet I said after 18 years I craved blood. How do those things interplay? So I'm validating both scenarios right now. You'll find out what I did about that too. I'm going to give you a little bit of a cliffhanger on that, and I promise to come back to that, but be bearing that in mind. When I started out on a health path, I was very young. I was 15 years old. I'm 42 now. And I early on became a vegetarian and then a vegan. I originally did it purely for nutritional reasons. I just wanted to be healthy. read some sports nutrition books about moving towards vegetarian and vegan, and then I just became on fire, and I just studied and went at things from there. I tend to be an extremist, and my motto is you don't know your limits until you exceed them, which can be a pro and a con. So I became a healthy, low-fat, whole-food vegan, probably eating half raw foods anyway, just from eating lots of fruits and vegetables and salads. This was in high school. I was doing lots of athletics. And my God, I was kicking ass. On the track team, on the cross country, on the swimming, on wrestling team, I was just doing awesome, and I had more endurance and energy than any other people. Doesn't mean I didn't win all the things I was at, because there's different levels of athleticism. But boy, I was just kicking ass, more so than I had before. I was working out, I was building muscle. People would challenge me and tell me my diet was weird, because nobody was doing that back then. And there came a point where I made a natural evolution in 1987 to understand raw foods. I thought, wow, I am eating too many canned products. I'm eating too many still kind of processed vegan foods. I'm still having a whole food vegan donut here with way better sugars and these other things, and I can be eating tons more fruits and vegetables. That was an amazing discovery for me. And actually, I found early on when I started that the beginnings of raw foodism, which is actually an early form of natural hygiene, which was the beginnings of raw foodism in America, actually started in Fairfield, Connecticut, which is my hometown. So when I lived there, I thought, this is fate. I found this diet. This is amazing. And I started on that. And natural hygiene, for those of you who don't know, is an older version of raw foods, very strict, food combining, no fruits with vegetables, no nuts and seeds with fruits, even fruit combining, no wheatgrass, no supplements. They're all potions and elixirs. Now, here's why natural hygiene thought that all supplements, anything that came in a pill, was a potion or an elixir. Because there were some supplements, like vitamin A, for example. Vitamin A, whether it's synthesized or if it's extracted from an animal's liver, has a definitive toxicity to it. But beta-carotene that converts into vitamin A has no toxicity at all, whether it's from spirulina, kale, or even isolated beta-carotene, does not have a toxicity. The body converts it into vitamin A as needed. Now, why is this mechanism in place? Because if you, off all the beta-carotene you took, of which I am loaded with, whenever I go to expos and they have those beta-carotene machines, I go in there, and they always tell me I'm the second highest person they've ever tested in beta-carotene, which really bothered me because I'm the second highest person. And the first highest person is my wife next to me. I'm like, how come you have higher beta-carotene than I do? That's not fair. Because I feel like I'm hardcore. She's like, well, I don't know. But if I converted all that beta-carotene into vitamin A, I would be dead. There's a limiting mechanism in the body that intentionally does not convert that. Now back to natural hygiene, because vitamin A has toxicity, because other vitamins have toxicity, because other minerals can have toxicity, therefore, everything that's a supplement, including wheatgrass, has toxicity. Because one member of a group, this Caucasian man punched me, all Caucasian men are bad. Because this African-American woman saved me, all African-American women are good. That's racial prejudice. The natural hygienes had a nutritional prejudice against any member that they associated with a supplement. And what they were doing, they were taking this baby and throwing it out with the bathwater. And as a species, we are designed somewhat to throw the baby out the bathwater. It's usually an all or nothing. This team is all good, that team's all bad. This type of approach is all good, that type of approach is all bad. We're all somewhat wired that way. Now, I've become aware of this, and I've become conscious of it over the last several years, many years now, so I'm less subject to it, but I'm still a human being and still subject to that. Nevertheless, with natural hygiene, eating huge amounts of fruits and vegetables raw, my health excelled and thrived to a new level. It was really, really awesome. But maybe a year or two into it, I started noticing some issues. I was able to run, I was able to lift weights, I was able to be very athletic, but I started noticing that my teeth started rotting out of my mouth, and I started having bladder infections. At the time, I didn't know what a bladder infection was. I just knew it hurt like heck when I urinated, and even when I didn't, it was burning. It's unusual for men to get a bladder infection because of the way we're plumbed. And also, it's a clear indication you're eating too much sugar, and it was definitively from the sugar. But if I wanted to keep up my rigorous exercise level, I had to eat a lot of food, and I had to eat a lot of sugar. Now let's talk about sugar and tooth decay. And I am a strong advocate, I want to make sure you know, of consumption of fruit in the correct amount for you. If you eat white sugar, if you put white sugar in a dish with the bacteria that cause dental disease, those bacteria are going to grow because it's going to eat that sugar. If you put fruit juice in the same dish with the disease-causing bacteria that cause gum disease, they're going to grow 10 times as high, or even more. Because when you put structured water from fruit, you put the vitamins, the minerals, the antioxidants, the phytonutrients, all the incredible things that you find in fruit that is unbelievably healing, especially if you have cancer, which we'll get into, it's going to feed your cells phenomenally better than white sugar. One will kill your cells and one will allow them to thrive. Bacteria are single-celled organisms. When you give them a vital, live source of sugar, such as fruit, they're going to be in heaven. They're going to grow like crazy. And when you eat so much fruit and do so much exercise, sweet was passing by my teeth 10 times more than a junk food junker who ate burgers and other things. So I was actually creating tooth decay. Now, I do not recommend people being a fruitarian. I've seen more people fail on fruitarian-type raw food diets than anything else. This is my truth and my experience, and I've been there. I believe, well, that's all I'll say on that. But I do recommend a certain amount of fruit, and I would do things like washes and so forth. I heard the previous speaker was talking about some things that you can put on your teeth. There's lots of other things you can put on your teeth. You can eat fruit. You just don't want it constantly all day for months and years at a time. There came a point where I discovered a, quote, supplement. I discovered Klamath algae and spirulina. Now, I asked all my natural hygiene type people about that, and they told me, well, why shouldn't I take this? This seems different than an isolated supplement. They'd say, well, you wouldn't go out in a state of nature and scoop up pond scum and eat it. I'm like, well, that sounds interesting, but I learned years later that ancient cultures for thousands of years have been doing that. In fact, the Aztecs used to give spirulina to their runners to run long distances and travel messages. They gave it to the warriors before battle. And I subsequently found out that spirulina actually has components in it that actually are completely active against the AIDS virus. I'm not saying spirulina will cure AIDS. I want to make sure it's clear. But there's components in it that will do that. There's components in spirulina that are phenomenal to moderate and balance allergic reactions. In fact, smokers that were taking spirulina in Finland in a study were dramatically less likely to get lung cancer while taking spirulina. Now, don't smoke and take spirulina. Just take spirulina and don't even smoke. I also found out that spirulina is one of the 2 foods in the world that has an amazing component in it called phycocyanin. And phycocyanin is a pigment, a blue pigment, that is the only known substance that I'm aware of that actually can regenerate kidney tissue, which is amazing because high-protein diets, and specifically high animal protein diets, are known for having a very hard time in the kidneys, promoting kidney stones and kidney degeneration if you have enough of them for long enough. And it's ironic that a high-protein food such as spirulina, about 65%, can actually help to regenerate the kidneys. The other food that has that is Klamath-like algae. Those blue-green algae both have them in there. Now, some will say, well, chlorella, that's not as good because chlorella doesn't have any phycocyanin in it, which is true. But in place of the phycocyanin, chlorella has significantly more chlorophyll than either of the blue-green algae, spirulina or Klamath algae. And chlorella is phenomenal for detoxification of heavy metals, even more so than those other 2 foods. However, for radiation protection, which I was already been into, but we've all been into since the Japanese disaster, chlorella is renowned for its ability to protect from radiation protection, and it does work. But spirulina is every bit as good as chlorella from protection and remediation from radiation problems. The other thing that is phenomenal for radiation is organic sources of iodine. You see a lot of when the Fukushima disaster happened, a lot of companies and people extremely well-meaning were putting out inorganic iodine tablets and inorganic iodine solutions, and you're far better off having inorganic iodine in your system, which has a definitive toxicity. But it's far less toxic than radioactive iodine. You're better off doing that than nothing. Far better than that is actually taking kelp dulse, seaweeds like that, which I have in many of my products, because there's organically bound iodine in there, which, if taken in its whole food form, does not have a toxicity. Back to natural hygiene. So they just threw the baby out with the bathwater. I decided to keep doing those algae. And then I discovered Viktoras Kulvinskas and Wigmorian type program with wheatgrass juice and enemas and cleansing and more vegetables and less fruits and so forth. And my health took another leap in incorporating those things. But there were some times in there where I was determined I was going to be all raw. I'd been a healthy, whole food vegan exercising, and after eating fruits and so forth for quite a long time, I was really, really hungry. Starch was out, of course. It was all poison. Herbs, elixirs, they were all poisonous. So I started eating more fats. There's some phenomenal healthy fats. Avocados I consider them a superfood, one of the highest sources of folic acid in the world, which is extremely important for pregnancy. But I was having a couple avocados a day. I was having maybe half a jar of almond butter a day. And a lot of other fat. And at that point, I started getting sluggish. my blood actually started to clump up, even though I was eating all raw foods. And I started gaining weight, started breaking out with acne, and I didn't feel like exercising anymore. I felt significantly less good than when I was on a half raw diet, 100% vegan, 100% whole food, none of all these heavy things. But I did it anyway because, damn it, I was raw, and I was going to stay raw no matter what. And I did that for 3 years. And I went through periods of relative health and relative excess. Now, I'm about 137 pounds today, which is a kind of a leaner weight for me. But I was about 170 pounds, same muscularity when I was raw, Christmas 1990. Wish I had the picture here. My face is fat. I'm broken out because I'm all raw in Connecticut where it's 10 degrees out. I'm eating tons of nuts and seeds. My wife, who's raw with me there, she never had premenstrual symptoms in her life, ever. All of a sudden, she's doubled over with cramps. She has unbelievably sore breasts, and she's having horrible menses. She had never had this before. What is going on? She's raw. But just previous to these horrible menstruational problems, she had had no menses. She didn't even have her period at all. And we were taught that that was a good thing because animals in nature don't menstruate because they eat raw foods. That's what we were taught. They eat whole foods, and the only reason that women menstruate, human women, is because they eat crap. So she started eating raw, and she stopped menstruating. We thought, this is awesome. You are so pure. You're just this pure goddess. This is beautiful. Yet she was still eating raw, and now she's having horrible periods, worse than she had ever imagined, things that the horrors that our other friends had told her about. Now, we subsequently learned a few things. I thought about my cat when I was young. I raised her on cooked food crap, animal products, a whole bunch of different things, everything. Just junk, Purina cat shell, whatever it happened to be. She never had her period. My friend's dogs never had their period. Animals don't have their period. But that was used as an example to say why my wife wasn't having her period. We also then found out that women who are too thin do not make enough estrogen because fat equals estrogen, and they stop menstruating. And some of them actually stop ovulating. And it's very, very unhealthy, and it completely messes up all your hormones. So my wife went from, she was unbelievably low weight. She was a raw food, mostly fruitarian type, triple vata, if any of you know what that means. Vatas tend to be skinny, pittas tend to be in the middle, kaphas tend to be thick. I'm a pitta vata for anyone who's curious, but she is a vata, had a horrible time. So then she said, I need to eat more food. So we started eating nut and seed pâtés. She started eating a tremendous amount of fat, all healthy, hardcore fats, 100% raw. When we were making dips and other things for Uncooking with Jameth and Kim, we were making things, we had a thermometer in there. As soon as it hit 118, it was compost. It was poison. I was like, we were just not going to touch that thing. So we were hardcore raw, but she's having horrible periods. Why? Even with these great fats. Because the more fat you consume, man or woman, the more estrogen your body is going to make. So she went from a low deficiency of estrogen to a gross overabundance of estrogen, all on raw foods, all on raw food veganism. Two completely different approaches. There was no middle ground for us. We couldn't do anything in the middle. Now, she eventually recovered from that, and she actually ended up eating some. Okay, let me talk about that's when the tuna fish craving came in. And she was working out, and she was eating a lot of protein from a lot of nuts and seeds. But she would be sore for 2 weeks afterwards. I was fine. I didn't have any issue. I would be sore for a day or two. Her body type, it was not working for. She craved things like beans. She craved things like legumes. She craved salt, which we were told not to eat. And after she didn't satisfy her cravings for those things, she actually craved tuna fish because her body said, if you're not going to eat those, let me crave something else that you used to eat. Let me try something else to get a different type of protein. Now, if she was not an ethical vegan, she became a vegetarian when she was 6 years old. She goes, Mommy, I'm going to be a vegetarian when I grow up because I like the animals. So she had her own personal choice there. She didn't eat the tuna fish. But one day she had some burritos, canned beans. I was tired of seeing my wife sick and ill. I wasn't getting anything cooked. But she's like, I need to eat that. So we got her some canned beans with salt. She ate them in the car. We bought a can opener, and she was just giddy. She came alive. There was balance there. It was something that nuts and seeds didn't give her. It didn't make any sense to us because this was cooked food poison. But her state of cleansing for 3 years didn't make sense to us either. She was not in good health, and it was flying in the face of everything we had learned. And we saw some people who had phenomenal health and success with raw foods and really hardcore raw food diets like we're on. And we also saw a lot of people who didn't have success that most of the leaders were ignoring, and she was one of them. Now, it took me a little longer to eat a few things cooked, and this was 3 years it took to eat cooked things because I just psychologically couldn't do it. So she would sit down and have some brown rice and some steamed vegetables and a huge raw salad, feel great. I'd sit down and have half an apple pie, a raw apple pie with almonds and dates and a crust, about 1,000 calories, 85 grams of fat, and I'd feel like crap. Or I'd make a nut loaf and feel real good after that nut loaf. And I thought, I didn't used to feel like this on potatoes, but it was raw, and I just couldn't psychologically get myself to eat something that was poison. Let's talk about some of those adages. Some of the adages that I was taught about raw, one, which was really, really powerful for me, is enzymes. You kill all the enzymes in your food when you cook it, which is true. But in thinking about this later years and observing things and thinking about what I had read and then reinterpreting that, Enzyme Nutrition by Edward Howell is the main book. And Edward Howell indicts raw foods as enzymeless. All the studies in there, the large pancreases, were on animals who were eating raw food, not cooked food. Look at the book. They were eating unsoaked nuts and seeds, which are they're not enzyme neutral, unsoaked nuts and seeds. You don't get enzymes out of them. They're enzyme negative. Not only can you not access the enzymes in that nut or seed, but your body's actually taking its own enzymes to try to break down those enzyme inhibitors. Those enzyme inhibitors are in there for a really, really good reason, which is why you can find kamut grains in Egyptian temples and thousands of years later sprout them, which is you can pretty much keep seeds, whether it be a grain, a bean, a nut or a seed, almost indefinitely, because the grain of the seed, it concentrates all its genetic material, and the enzyme inhibitors put that food basically on a cryogenic freeze for when conditions are favorable and you have water and moisture and nutrients, then it grows into a food. Now, back in the day with natural hygiene, you didn't sprout anything because Herbert Shelton, one of the fathers of natural hygiene, didn't sprout anything, so you didn't either, period. Herbert Shelton died of Parkinson's disease. The natural hygienists all tended to live into their 80s and then die of some degenerative disease. They were far healthier, but I wanted to know why they were dying. It was an early prototype, in my opinion, of a raw food diet, and I think that most of us have now evolved. Most of us don't even know about natural hygiene because literally the majority of its proponents have died out and been replaced with better systems. I subsequently found out, because there was a lot of people in natural hygiene that ended up craving meat or going back to it, that the original people in natural hygiene, Tilden, before Shelton, actually once a week had people have a silver dollar piece of red meat because he found that they actually did better. They skipped over anything cooked and went to an actual piece of meat because it's the baby with the bathwater. If you're going to eat something bad, you must eat something really bad. They didn't have algae. They didn't have tempeh. They didn't have any legumes. They didn't have anything else of the whole vegan things that were higher in protein that had no toxins in them. And something else I want to talk about in animal products. There's certainly some nutrition in them. But iron. Iron is something that is essential for us. And as a vegan, I've been challenged lots of times on the iron issue. Vegans are deficient in iron. You're more likely to be low on iron if you're vegan. And you are more likely to be low on iron if you're vegan. That is a true statement. But what's the result of that? And let's just look into that a little more. And I used to lose arguments on this, but then I just asked people to arm wrestle. Usually I would win. I would never ask to arm wrestle someone who was a lot bigger than me. But I like to make the point. There's two types of iron out there. One's called heme iron. Heme iron occurs in animal products, and it also occurs in supplements, supplemental iron. And then there's non-heme iron, the inferior, weak, pathetic vegan iron that occurs in plant foods. The idea being that non-heme plant sources of iron is less absorbable than heme iron. And most of the time, that's a true statement. You can absorb iron better from a red piece of animal flesh and a supplement than you can from kale. But I subsequently learned out that's only half the truth. If you are sufficient in iron, because iron is not an antioxidant, it's an essential nutrient, but iron is an oxidant. It creates free radical damage. In fact, on bottles of supplements that you see that contain iron, they're legally mandated to say the following: warning, accidental overdose of iron-containing supplements is a chief cause of fatal poisoning in children under 6. They'll kill themselves if they eat that iron, because that iron has an absorption rate, period. So if you have low iron, that iron is going to have an absorption rate. If you already have too much iron in your system, that iron is going to absorb and be an oxidant in your system anyway. Your body cannot regulate how it absorbs it. Let's flash back to plants. Spirulina, kale, parsley, whatever it happens to be. This non-heme iron, when you are sufficient, you have enough iron in your system, your body will not absorb any of that iron. It's like we have enough iron because that iron has a protein, a bioflavin, a lipid, all these other complexes around it that allow the body to recognize it and make a choice. The body says no iron today. So that's why it said that iron is less absorbed from plants. But when you are iron deficient, The body rips all those components off that iron and absorbs more iron from spirulina or kale or parsley than it does from an animal product. But there is no toxicity of it whatsoever. There's a natural balance there. Something else I want to give you also my perspective is D2 and D3, which is a big hot issue right now. D3, in my experience and opinion, is like vitamin A. It's like inorganic iron. D3 is more of a destination form. In fact, it used to be that people didn't take D3 because it was known that D3, if you take too much of it, starts to calcify your joints and your arteries, contributed to coronary artery disease. It's actually at some point can start to take calcium out of your bones and put it into your bloodstream. It has a toxicity because it's a destination form. Now, if you're deficient in vitamin D and all you have is a vitamin D3 supplement, well, you're going to be better off taking it than not. But another example is given, even if you're in the sun, if you take vitamin D2, is a precursor to D3. It's like beta-carotene. You will never achieve the levels of D3 in your blood that you can with D3. That's a fact. It won't happen. But we then look at people that get in the sun, Caucasian people in the sun who make more D3. The whiter you are, the more D3 you're going to make in the sun. When you first get in the sun, you start making D3 immediately. Very soon after getting in the sun, your body stops production of D3 and it starts production of D2. Because the body knows that if you have too much D3 in your system all at once, you're going to start to overcalcify your body and start taking it from your bones. And but at the same time, you'd think that people that got in the sun would have high vitamin D3 levels, but they do not. Why is that? Because the body won't let your D3 go that high on a natural scenario, on a natural basis. The body wants to be able to convert that. Now, what should be being tested, in my opinion, and I ask for everyone, whenever I go to lectures and hear other speakers, I always learn and gain things from that. And I ask other speakers, other people, if there's something that sounds true here, if there's a different perspective, to please consider it. And what I believe we should be testing for is not D3 levels in the blood. We should be testing for bone density. I have never taken vitamin D3. I don't even take vitamin D2 because I get it from chickweed and kelp and alfalfa and a bunch of things that I have in Vitamin Green. And my bone density is rock solid. Now, my wife didn't always have that situation. She had osteoporosis, first from actually eating a huge amount of animal products because she was skinny and wanted to gain weight in college, then from being a fruitarian, and then from having celiac disease, which means she's completely gluten intolerant. Her bones, she had osteoporosis. And she was able to reverse that osteoporosis. She wasn't doing exercise, she wasn't getting the sun, but we're doing lots of juices, lots of hardcore, healthy, whole food, vegan diet. And she actually took vitamin D2 as a supplement. She said, you know what? I think I might need it. It's not toxic. It's not going to hurt me. So I'm going to take it anyway. We had debates. Well, did you need to take a supplement? Do you not? She took it. And she completely reversed her osteoporosis on a vegan diet with never touching vitamin D3. So we should be studying bone density, not D3 levels in the blood. That's the destination form. Another thing I want to talk about is testosterone. Testosterone is a hormone that's very important for both men and women. It creates drive. It creates strength. In excess and out of balance, you can create murderous people, aggressive, angry. It's not good, but it's part of what makes people fiery. It's part of what makes men, and it's an important thing to have. And if you take isolated steroids, which are either the synthetic testosterone or it's testosterone just isolated from animals' parts, their genitals, other things. Bodybuilders do that, competitive bodybuilders, and what happens is actually, ironically, your genitals start to shrink. If you're a woman, you become much more masculine. If you're a man, you grow more hair in your chest, you lose it on your head, you start to become bald. Your muscularity increases tremendously. Your vascularity increases tremendously. Your ability to have strength increases tremendously. And your aggression increases tremendously, and your ability to die of cancer, specifically prostate cancer and other cancers, is dramatically increased with a level of testosterone that high, and you break out with acne like a maniac. Now let's go back to plants. And I'm just giving you examples. Let's talk about Tribulus. It's a fruit that grows in India. And years ago, I was heard that it increased testosterone. So I took about 12 tablespoons of a dried powder a day in a tea, which is a massive dose. Just massive, over the top. Because I wanted to say, hey, let's see what you're made of, Tribulus. Let's see what you got. So I always take it. It was disgusting and vile. Disgusting. No one else would drink it in my family because like, ugh. And what I found out that this was having an effect on me. I had more muscle. I walked by the mirror. I was like, holy shit, I am buff. I'm ripped. I had more energy working out. I was yelling harder. I was playing the music even louder. My wife would not come out to the garage when I was working out because it was way too freaking loud. And I was feeling great. I did break out with a little bit of acne. Nothing compared to the guys that I saw on steroids, but I had some acne, so I have some more testosterone. And one of the reasons you broke up with acne is because my hormone levels were returning to levels that they were in youth when you're more subject to having acne. But I also noticed another thing. I'd heard some bodybuilder type people that I tried to get off steroids. They would say they would actually get out of their car with road rage and start fights with people because they were so angry that somebody cut them off. And I thought, you guys are out of control. But I found myself when driving and thought, you son of a bitch. I was more aggressive, and I actually thought, I'm going to get out of the car and beat the crap out of the guy, and I knew I could. I don't care that he's 250 and I'm 140, I could take him, because that's what testosterone does for you. I did never get out of the car. It wasn't even really a possibility. It's just one of those thoughts you have. I found myself snapping more. And also, after I worked out, I was like, hey, baby, let's have a romantic evening. My wife was writing a book during that time. She says, you're going to have to get off that stuff until I'm done writing the book, because I just don't have the time right now. Now, my point is, I had all of the results of someone who took steroids, whether natural or synthetic, either testicular-type extracts or synthetic steroids, but I had them at a moderate level. But I absolutely had them. These plant-based hormone precursors work strong, but my body would only let me make so much testosterone. Now, I was able to duplicate that experiment with some women, and it had an effect on them, but none of them had my level of aggression. None of them had my level of muscularity. None of them lost their breasts or any other, what I call the feminine charm layer of tissue, because they're women and their bodies only let them convert enough testosterone so they're still women, because the body had the opportunity to convert it. Okay, in getting back to raw foods, tremendous success with raw foods. And also, in being a vegan for a long time and a raw fooder, I've noticed that more raw fooders who were vegans to begin with or became vegans as a raw fooder, it was the thing that made people leave a vegan diet more than anything else. So raw foods is actually the worst thing that's ever happened to veganism, because people would do this. Because fried chicken and because animal protein, which we're going to get into in a minute, is so bad for you, everything cooked is crap. Throw the baby out with the bathwater. Even though people on macrobiotic diets have overcome heart disease, even though people on all-cooked macrobiotic whole food vegan diets have overcome cancers, you can't overcome cancer on a poisonous diet. And let's talk about leukocytosis. Leukocytosis, as I was taught, was very powerful, similar to enzymes, and it's your body raises its white blood cell count just like it does when you're sick and have an infection after you eat anything cooked. All cooked foods raise your white blood cell count. It's like an infection. It's a poison. My God, that's serious. And all raw foods don't. That alone was enough for me to conclude that all cooked food was poison. I was never, ever eating any again. Yet there was many people who were eating all raw and getting worse. They go back to eating a whole food vegan diet, they get better. There was fruitarian people who were so deficient in protein, in essential fatty acids, in B vitamins, in everything but vitamin C and a lot of other things, they would go back to eating meat. It was the opposite end of the spectrum. And after they eat meat for a while, they feel like crap, and they go back to being a fruitarian, missing everything in the middle. And I've subsequently found, with my own testing, that leukocytosis doesn't actually occur when you eat cooked foods. I did a test on myself for the worst thing I would eat, a huge cookie with white sugar, white flour, hydrogenated oil, and I ate 2 3/4 of them. I couldn't eat the rest of them because I was nauseous. I had my live blood cell analysis machine in my van. I tested my blood. It was thick. It was clumped up. It looked horrible. I had my blood tested before I ate the cookies and after I ate the cookies. After I ate the cookies, my insulin was through the roof. My blood sugar was through the roof. My cholesterol was up. My triglycerides were up. My blood looked horrible. It was thick. But I had no increase in white blood cell count. 0. Now, subsequently, other people have actually done tests with cooked meat and found out that cooked meat caused leukocytosis. But cooked processed junk food, vegan didn't. Not that you did either one. I've actually, after that, done that same test, not on myself because I wouldn't do it, but with raw meat, and found out that raw meat also causes leukocytosis, raising of your white blood cells. Why would that happen? Let's talk about organ transplant operations. Everybody who has an organ transplant operation, even if this heart or this liver is going to save your life, your body will constantly, if I get a liver from you, this man who punched me earlier, he's going to make amends and give me his liver. It's in my system. My liver is going to say, that liver is yours. It's not me. It's not my genetic code. But it has proteins in it that's coding for him. It's an infection. I'm going to attack it and kill it. People that have transfusions of organs have to take immune suppressive drugs for the rest of their life because their body's going to reject that organ. It's leukocytotic constantly. When you have a protein from a different creature, and research has proven this, you have leukocytosis. So whatever benefits that an animal product could bring to you, know that there's drawbacks too. You're going to have leukocytosis. It's not. I know this is shocking, but the only credible research that we can even validate shows that leukocytosis is not a cooked food issue. It's an animal product, raw or cooked issue. So if you're a raw fooder thinking you can eat raw animal products, you certainly can. But there's health ramifications of that. The other reason, raw is given all the credit for a raw food diet. And there has been amazing successes on raw food and whole food vegan diets, people overcoming almost any condition you can possibly imagine. And there's many of you amongst here. However, raw is given all the credit. And because raw is given all the credit, everything else that comes into a raw food diet is irrelevant. Let me tell you why raw is maximum 20% of why a raw food diet is healthy. Maximum 20%. And if you ignore the other 80%, you're going to have a path that's less healthful. And I've been extremely helpful at helping people who have had challenges with raw food. And since my wife and I have started talking about this, we've had flocks of people coming to us that I'm doing everything right, but I'm still not well, I'm still sick. When you go raw, the average person going raw, at first you become a vegan. Just being a vegan, just not having animal protein, not having that thing, you have a tremendous benefits for being vegan. There's so much evidence for that with the China study and other studies. Reversing heart disease, so many different things. Then you're also eating organic food. Organic is a huge difference, and raw fooders are very health conscious, and pretty much all raw fooders are eating organic food. You're also eating, you're not just eating cooked Twinkies, now you're eating raw Twinkies. You're eating you're a vegan, whole food, vegan organic, and a whole food. You're eating a whole foods diet. You're not eating processed foods when you're raw food. You're a vegan, organic, and whole. If you're a whole food, organic, vegan, those three things right there, you have a huge boon in your health, as long as you're not on a crazy, rigid, fruitarian type diet. You then add on top of that massive amounts of whole food, organic, vegan, and then you add of that massive amounts of fruits and vegetables. It's not just all grains or all potatoes, it's fruits and vegetables you're eating. Organic, vegan, whole food, massive amounts of fruits and vegetables, all cooked. You're still dramatically healthier. You add on top of that fresh, vital, high water content raw foods, which is one of 5 different things, and you're really having a tremendously high level of health. It's 20% of why a raw food diet is beneficial, but it's given all the credit, so please bear that in mind. I only have a certain amount of time, so I'm going to throw a bunch of other things out. Use sodium and salt. If you don't have enough organic sodium in your system, I'm talking usually supplemental sodium, whether it be gluten-free tamari or miso or unrefined Celtic sea salt or Himalayan sea salt, you will start to crave blood. You'll start to crave flesh. And 18 years into veganism, I was doing a tremendous high water, about 2 gallons of liquid a day, absolutely zero sodium and some herbal diuretics that cause water to flush from my system. I was on an ultra-high water, ultra-sodium deficient diet for about 2 months. And my body started craving. First it started craving miso. Then it started craving tamari, straight, namashoyu, anything with salt, like I would salivate over salt. After I didn't have that, it started craving the steak juice, the juice that came off the steak when I had it when I was a kid, and I hated that. I hated that I was craving that. I heard other people crave things. One day, I was in the fridge, and I saw the tamari, and I just started salivating. I thought, you know, this is a bunch of shiitake. I opened the jar and I drank the tamari like a juice. I felt this tingling energy come all over my body like God had just touched me. And it tasted exactly like that steak juice. And if you heard tamari, if you remember the steak juice with salt, it tastes very similar. I then went ahead and since I did this, let me just take my hand and just scoop it into the miso and just shove it in my mouth. I was so deficient in sodium that I started craving blood. I never craved blood again, because I reintroduced salt into my diet. I've seen that happen so many times with raw fooders. It's throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It's going over all these other things. And it's my experience, others may have a different experience, that the vast majority of raw fooders do not thrive long-term on an all-raw diet. That may be controversial, but that is my experience after about 24 years into raw foods. It's my experience that if you add to that a whole food vegan diet. I'm not talking about crap. I'm not talking about, isolated soy protein. I'm not talking about a bar. I'm not talking about a soy pizza or other stuff. I'm talking about millet, quinoa, amaranth, even brown rice. I'm talking about the legume family, which are phenomenal for balancing hormones, all the legumes. Those things are phenomenal. You can have a better level of health, and you can do better for the environment, and you can, if you have any personal considerations or ethical considerations over eating animals, you can alleviate those within a whole food vegan paradigm, but you've got to be willing to cook. And I would submit that starting fire, which I actually could do in a state of nature, and cooking a potato, which tastes phenomenal when you cook it, tastes like crap when it's raw, it's unbelievably hard to digest, is much more natural than killing this chicken. The other thing it's said is that when vegans, that if you're vegan, you are deficient in protein. Vegan is a diet for the weak, the pathetic, the feminine, the meek, for women, for meditators, for people just doing, weak, pathetic things. Now, if that were the case, and I'm running out of time, I'm trying to make sure I get it all in here, then we wouldn't have Mac Danzig. He's an American professional mixed martial artist and instructor, and he's the former lightweight champion of the King of the Cage and the Gladiator Challenged. He was the winner of the Ultimate Fighter 6 in 2007. He won. He beat the crap out of all these other guys. And for those of you who don't know, the Ultimate Fighter is basically you go out there with hardly any gloves and you beat the crap out of the other guy until they're pretty much bludgeoned and lying in a pile of their blood and almost dead. It's on. It's full-on aggressive masculine. He won as a vegan. He won the Ultimate Fighter 6, a vegan. And he's been a strict vegan since 2004 and is an animal rights advocate. Vegans are not wimps. Carl Lewis, remember him in the 90s and the 80s as an incredible athlete. And he credits his outstanding 1991 results in part to the vegan diet he adopted in 1990. He had better results when he became a vegan. Now, I've been a vegan for a long time. Let me get another prop here. I'm not going to take my shirt off. I was chastised for that. I have a tank top on. I'm not a professional bodybuilder. I'm a weekend athlete. But I also don't have sand kicked in my face. We're told that vegans are weak, that you can't lift weights. Well, I lift weights. I'm one of many vegan bodybuilders. I'm not a bodybuilder, I'm just a weekend warrior. But there's vegan bodybuilders that are 5 times the size of me. They're far stronger, and I'm not losing enough food. How much weight is that? I don't know. I just grabbed a weight. Okay, my time is running down, and I can talk to people more about cancer at my booth. But I want to give just an example. If you have a degenerative disease, a serious degenerative disease, that disease, if it be cancer or something else, is on 24/7. And you've got to make sure that you are on 24/7. I want to give you a few examples. Example number 1, if this is your degenerative disease, you need to attack it. Here would be one example of doing that. You're just you're in there, you're fighting, that's all you're doing. So, I'm making an effort. I want to overcome this. You're still sick. Not enough of an effort. So next, you bring out some gloves. Time to get some equipment, time to get some more superfoods, some more good things, some more good food, some more meditation. And God, I wish I had more time to go into the whole cancer thing with everybody in disease. And you need to have a better approach. Like, all right, now I got some of these. Now I can really hit this thing. You really think you're winning? You're just kind of working this thing over. Hold it. It's okay. You're feeling pretty good about yourself. You stop for a moment, and it's coming back at you.
Don't hit me.
So then you put on, you go to another level. To move this.
I'll move it.
Take a sec. Because if you have degenerative disease, and I was talking to a woman earlier in the audience about that, it is on constantly, and you got to make sure you fight hard and don't stop. Thank you, Len. So you better put on the best gloves you possibly can. One more more set of gloves here. You got to make sure you have the right weaponry. And I'll say it briefly. When you are fighting a degenerative disease, you need at least 2 weapons.
And just to clarify, I'm not the degenerative disease. Definitely
One
not.
weapon you need to wield well is the sword. If you don't know how to have a strong masculine fight for degenerative disease, you're likely to die. This is an important tool. Just as important a tool is a magic wand. The magic wand represents the femininity, forgiveness, compassion, meditation, yoga, things of that nature. It's just as important. If you're a woman, bear the sword. If you're a man, use the wand. You've got to use them both.
Jameth, 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 Jameth. Where do I get off the stage?
You gotta attack this thing like your life depends it.
Dr. Jameth Sheridan. Dr. Jameth Sheridan!